I would definitely encourage all of you, right, as you're like thinking about the test prep and you're, focusing on problems and trying to learn new concepts. It's also, I think, important to also focus on like your mental side, because not only is that, I think, going to help your test score, it's also going to make you feel a lot better when you're going through the test prep.
Hey, this is Avi Gutman with another Ask Me Anything event brought to you by quantreasoning.com. I invite you to join me live next time. We do this every Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern, and you can attend for free by starting your free trial at quantreasoning.com.
We have a surprise for you today. Chris, why don't I just let you explain why you're here and what you'd like to share with everyone?
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Good morning. I think I know about half of you, but not all of you. So yeah, for those of you who don't know me, my name's Chris. I was a member of Quant Reasoning for, it feels like almost about a year, up until recently. And so, yeah, I found the community and found Avi through, I think it was just randomly online, and then went to the AMAs every week or almost every week and participated on the forums, read the book, and have had a long, arduous journey with the GMAT. It was something where like my verbal score has always been pretty good, but my quant was pretty poor. And so, yeah, wanted to just come on today because I took the GMAT about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I got over a 700 on the GMAT, which was kind of beyond my wildest dreams when I first started, and wanted just to kind of like come back and, say thank you to Avi and to all of you for, helping me this past, year or so. And for those who don't know me and who I haven't, seen before, also just wanted to offer some encouragement, that as you're going through the GMAT, you're going through these AMAs, you're not sure if what you're doing is helping, and it can be stressful with deadlines approaching. Just wanted to send, well wishes and definitely encouragement that you can do it. So I didn't think I could, and I did, and that means you can too. So yeah, happy to be here. Yeah, growing up, I was a huge reader. I mean, I read all the time growing up. Like that was pretty much what I did for fun. And then, and during my undergrad, I actually started my undergrad thinking I wanted to be a teacher. And so I studied English literature. Also did another major in like a liberal arts field that was a little bit more, let's call it like critical reasoning focused. So those two undergraduate degrees that I did and kind of that focus for 4 years, I think kind of helped sharpen my skills. And something that I talked about with Avi. So I actually did like a 2-hour tutoring session with Avi, while I was leading up to the prep, and it was super helpful. And, one of the things that, I kind of realized through talking with him is that I really have like enjoyment when I do the verbal. Like I feel like at home, I feel like, when I'm reading the stories and reading about the little scenarios, I actually put myself in the place of someone who's like in the story. And then it was, pretty easy for me to see with talking with Avi that, the quant is very, like you can do the same thing with quant, right? Where when you're talking about machines breaking or, you're looking at a certain rate of return, if you're putting yourself in that story, for me, it really helped me kind of engage and, think a little bit more like it was a real problem rather than like a math test. So I think one of my takeaways in talking with Avi was that, the more I channeled my, let's say, like mindset towards thinking about the quant section in the same way that I was already thinking about the verbal, totally like relaxed me, made me more confident. And I do think it helped my score. So Avi, thank you for that insight. So I think the first time I took the quant, it was a 40. And I took the GMAT 4 times, by the way. And so each time I took the GMAT, my verbal score went up, even though I never studied verbal, and my quant score went down every single time. And so it was enormously frustrating and confusing. And I felt like the more I studied quant, the worse it got. I think that was what was happening. The third time I took the GMAT, Joseph, I think the quant was as low as like a 36. I mean, it was really bad. And then that's what triggered me to have the 2-hour session with Avi, which gave me like a lot of confidence and, helped me realize that I think a lot of my issues were, let's say, mental rather than, knowing I could do it. And then I wound up with a 47, which I never thought I was going to get better than a 45. That was what I had set out as a target. And so, yeah, when I got the 47 flash on the screen at the end, I almost yelled because I was so exciting, but I was in the test center, so I couldn't do that. So,
but it means that you were always capable of a 47. You were just your own worst enemy. And that's not just you, Chris. That's almost every student I've ever worked with was not achieving their true potential. Specifically in quant, there's something about math that just puts us into fight or flight mode, right? And with the exam pressure and the timer ticking and all of that stuff, it's very hard to remain in that creative, open-minded headspace that is required in order to do well on this test. And I think that's probably what changed from your 36 to your 47. It's not like you got smarter all of a sudden. It's just that you were able to I guess, have more confidence on the test and remain calm. Is that fair?
Totally. I think for me, the biggest improvement in my quant score wasn't my ability, I don't think. And it was going into the question feeling like I was about to explore, I was about to play around, and it was much more of a relaxed atmosphere. The times I had taken the GMAT before, I came into the first question really apprehensive. And there was actually one test where the first question came up and it wasn't immediately obvious what I needed to do to solve the problem. And I instantly went into panic mode. And I probably was a third of the way through the quant section until I had calmed down. And that was where I scored the 36 because it was just a complete train wreck. So the time, my final attempts where I, exceeded my score target, I was definitely intentionally manifesting as much Zen as I could. And a lot of that was, I think, through actively practicing mindfulness, which is something that I did before the test. I came into the testing center, like very intentionally kind of downplaying like the significance of the test. Like I was not, thinking like this was going to be a defining moment in my life. I didn't think it was going to be, a stressful thing. I just kind of came there and took some deep breaths, and it almost sounds silly how easy it is once you kind of get yourself into that mindset. But it was definitely something that I had to work on. So I would definitely encourage all of you, right, as you're like thinking about the test prep and you're, focusing on problems and trying to do, learn new concepts. It's also, I think, important to also focus on like your mental side, because not only is that, I think, going to help your test score, it's also going to make you feel a lot better when you're going through the test prep.
One last comment from me there is I want all of you to think about what it does to your mindset, what it does to your feeling of how significant the moment is when you take, let's say, a practice test the day before. I think how counterproductive that would be if you take a practice test the day before your actual test. Presumably you even, I imagine, dream about the GMAT if you took a practice test the day before. So like imagine what that does to your mindset if you dream about the GMAT the night before your test. It's usually not a good dream when that happens. It's usually a nightmare, right? And then you go in and it feels like such a big deal. And this is why I suggest to students to just take at least a week off completely from the GMAT before the actual test, because it helps you recognize that this is not a big deal. This is not a significant moment in your life. This is not a life-changing event, because you don't want it to feel like a life-changing event when you go in there. You want to feel like you're just going in to have some fun with some riddles and make some inferences to the best of your ability. You don't want it to feel like a big deal. And this is why it's so important to just step away from the GMAT entirely for at least a week before the test.
Yeah, and I actually, after I got my results back, I sent Avi an email, and this is his suggestion, so I'll give credit where it's due. But Avi's suggestion is one that I'm going to do, which is, yes, I am going to take the GMAT one more time, but I'm going to do it after I've completed all my applications and everything is done. And Avi's recommendation was not to do any studying whatsoever. Knowing me, I'll probably want to do a couple practice problems the week leading up just to make sure I'm not rusty. But essentially, all of my prep, all of the routines that I had done in terms of studying for the exam, I'm not doing those ever again, thankfully. I'm just going to do the GMAT one more time with a very minimal amount of preparation. And I would say kind of the benefit that Avi suggested was that, one, you're less stressed about the outcome because you already have a good score in the bank. You've already allocated all of your time towards your test prep or towards your applications. So that's all done. And really the only thing you have to lose is, a couple $100, which is not insubstantial. But that's kind of the big loss. And then the other loss is, maybe 3 or 4 hours of your time, which once you've already completed the rest of your applications, hopefully you have plenty of time to spare. So I am going to take it one more time just to see how I do. Having taken the GMAT 4 times, I think by the second time, my timing, I think, was totally fine. I definitely took probably 4 or 5 practice exams before I even took my first official GMAT exam, just to practice on timing. And so once I got the timing piece down, I kind of stopped doing the practice tests. But for me, I think the most important piece of my preparation was I definitely think I raised my ability. So like when I mentioned that as I took the GMAT each time, my verbal score kept going up, even though I never practiced my verbal ever. I do think my work, focusing on reasoning-based approaches to quant, I do think that improved my reasoning score overall. So I definitely think there was like a spillover effect. I think the big difference for me, though, in terms of the score from the third time I took the GMAT to the final time I took the GMAT was, I think, more so just being relaxed and being focused. But I do think if you're relaxed and you're calm and you're thinking clearly, I do think that's going to help you with your timing, right? You're not going to panic. You're not going to go into a spiral where you focus on one question and you took 4 minutes to finish it. Now you're playing catch up the rest of the way. So I do think if you're relaxed, if you're confident, if you're calm, it will also help you with your timings.
I want to jump in there and emphasize one thing that Chris said earlier. It sounded, Chris, like you were very willing to let go of questions in quant. And that can't be overstated. Like, it's so important to have that willingness to bail on questions when you can't think of a good next step. I think that's how you articulated it, Chris. You're like, well, if I don't know what the next step is, or even if I can think of a next step, but then I don't really know what I would do after that. You kind of have to think a couple steps ahead. Like, all right, I guess I could do this algebra here, but then what? I'm not really sure then what. Okay, I'll just let go of this question. And that's something that most people find really difficult to do, and that leads them to run out of time. Then your score just drops because the GMAT just sees that you got all of the last 6 questions wrong and continuously reevaluates its opinion of you. Oh, got this one wrong. Oh, this one is easier and got it wrong. Oh, here's an easier one. Oh, got that one wrong too. Oh, here's an easier one. Oh, that one was also wrong. So now the GMAT has completely changed its opinion of you at the end of the test because you ran out of time. So it's really, really important to have that willingness to let go of questions. And to Chris's point, if you're more relaxed and you don't think that this is a life-changing event and you don't think it's that big of a deal, then you're going to be more willing to let go of questions when appropriate. And Chris, one more question for you. Did you always do verbal after quant? Like, what was the order?
I always did quant first and then verbal. Initially, that was because I just wanted to get quant out of the way. That was what I told myself. And I wanted to approach quant when I had, let's say, the maximum amount of mental energy. And so actually leading up to the final exam, I was really debating if I wanted to switch the order or not, because I remember the third time I took the test, I was so worked up, I was so nervous that when I, you go through the check-in procedure at the test center, your nerves are high, and then if you see something that's, if you see a question that, let's say, is not your strong suit, so for me that was quant, that maybe kind of set me down put me into panic mode. But what I decided was actually I wanted to keep the order because it was what I had been practicing, is what I had been preparing for. I didn't want to make a last minute change on the morning of the test. So there, I just kind of trusted that everything else that I had done leading up until the week and the weeks were, before the test would help me. And so does that mean that I would have maybe scored higher had I switched the order? Maybe yes, maybe no. But I think for me, my takeaway was just trust your prep. And if you are going to make a decision about changing the order in which you take the test, I would definitely agree with my approach to not do that the day of. I think you would want to prep that at least a week or so in advance, so you're not second guessing yourself.
The reason I asked is because my hypothesis is that as we change our quant approaches from mindless to mindful, from algebra to number lines, etc., then we are left with more energy, and by energy I mean reasoning energy or mental energy, whatever you want to call it. We're left with a lot more of that for the following section. So in my experience, working with a lot of people, it's just kind of incredible how their verbal score always seems to go up, even though all we're working on is quant. But in those cases, they're always doing verbal after quant. And so that's my hypothesis. There was a really funny thing that happened when I was at Manhattan Prep. Some of you may have already heard this story. We did some analytics to see who was the best instructor in terms of score improvement on the Manhattan Prep practice tests, because we had all this data from our students. And so we split it for quant and for verbal, and it turned out that I was in the top 3 in the whole company for verbal score improvement. But my boss knew that I don't actually teach verbal in my classes here in Toronto, because I did a flipped class where the students would study the material at home, and then it was almost like office hours in the course itself. And so I always just answered whatever questions the students had, and the students always only had quant questions. Maybe because we were in Toronto, maybe if we were in India, it would have been the other way around. But in Toronto, and my boss knew this, I was only doing quant in class, and yet I was in the top 3 instructors for verbal improvement, and not for quant, mind you. My boss was a very funny guy. He said, you're in the top 3 and you don't even teach verbal. Maybe you also shouldn't teach quant. And then you'll be in the top 3 for quant as well. Now, my hypothesis there was the following. Number one, their verbal is improving because they do verbal after quant, and by replacing their math with logic, their verbal goes up. And then my explanation for why their quant isn't improving as much is because the Manhattan Prep practice tests are not designed well to test reasoning in quant. They're designed as math tests. And what we saw is when they actually took the real GMAT, that's where they would score. I think my average was 100 points difference from their last Manhattan Prep practice test to the actual GMAT. On average was about 100-point difference, because in my opinion, it was all, in our class, it was all about the reasoning, which is what the GMAT is really geared up to test, and not the Manhattan Prep practice test. So I just thought I'd share that as an interesting anecdote.
I prepared specifically for the quant section, just in case this is helpful for any of you. And I'm taking some suggestions that Avi gave me as well. So for me personally, I actually struggle with arithmetic. Like, I make careless errors where if I'm doing addition, I will, 4 plus 4 equals 9 sometimes. I mean, it's that bad. So what I did leading up to the exam, basically for like the first month, like the month leading up to the exam, is Avi has a video it's called like the ultimate GMAT exercise, and maybe getting the title wrong. but Avi can link there. And that video basically has you take random numbers, on a Google Assistant or something, and then you do the prime boxing. And you combine that prime boxing with kind of the reasoning-based way that we do arithmetic, where you have you're not doing long division, long subtraction. You're breaking things out by the hundreds, the hundreds, tens, ones, etc. I literally did that for almost half an hour every day, almost, and did that in combination with 1 or 2 official GMAT questions, when I had time. And for me, it was a huge improvement in my in number sense, I think, in terms of breaking down primes. My arithmetic got better. There have actually been occasions after I've taken the test where in my work, there's been some addition that have come up, and I've just instinctively done the work in that way, where I'm not doing long addition, long subtraction. So for me, that was super helpful. I also read Avi's book, almost all of it. I don't think I read the last chapter, but I read pretty much all the book. And I read that in a very slow methodological way. So I definitely didn't zoom through it. But for me, I think if you are struggling with, factorization, you're struggling with divisibility, doing that GMAT workout, even 15 minutes a day, and just making that a consistent part of your morning, or maybe it's the last thing you do before you go to bed, whatever you can do to make that routine. It definitely seems maybe a little silly when you're doing it just one time. But the more you do it, the more you realize that it becomes natural. And I definitely think that helped me on the test. And it also gave me confidence that when I had to divide or multiply or subtract or add, I had so much practice with it. It wasn't like something I was thinking about doing. I just did it. So I would definitely recommend that for anyone who may be in a similar place that I was. So that was my plug.
If you found this video useful, go to quantreasoning.com for a lot more where that came from. You should also click that like button and let me know in the comments below what you'd like me to make future videos about. And of course, if you haven't yet subscribed, go ahead and do that and click that bell below so you get notified about future videos. See you next time.